Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be tackling something, well, it's a topic that most people don't like to talk about. You know, it can be kind of sensitive, but we're going to be looking at navigating a relationship with a narcissistic wife.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear right up front. We're not trying to label anyone here.
Yeah.
Really, the goal is to understand patterns.
Yeah.
Help people listening develop some strategies for dealing with these kind of dynamics.
Exactly.
And we found this, well, there's this video that lays out 9 specific techniques for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to say, some of them were really eye-opening, even for me.
Yeah, there are some really interesting ones in there for sure.
Like, did you know that one of the biggest red flags is how your wife praises you?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like, think back where she, give you lots of compliments before you got married.
You know, everyone's all lovey-dovey.
Right. And then after you tie the knot, it's like a switch flips.
Exactly.
And suddenly it's all criticism all the time.
Yeah, and it's often done in this kind of public-private way.
Oh, we mean?
So she's super complimentary, when you're out with other people.
Oh, so it's all for show.
Yeah, exactly. Like, she's putting on this performance almost to get validation from others.
And that feeds her, her narcissism.
Exactly. It's all about feeding that sense of superiority,
While hiding this deep insecurity underneath.
Right. But a change in how she praises you, that's not the only sign.
Right. There are more.
Oh, yeah. The video we're talking about, it points out a whole bunch of other things to look out for. Like, have you ever noticed her trying to make you jealous?
Deliberately make me jealous. Like how?
I mean, it could be anything, really. Maybe she flirts with other guys right in front of you.
Wow.
Or she's always comparing you to, other people, always making you feel like you're not quite good enough.
Ouch. Yeah, that would be tough.
Yeah.
So she's trying to keep you off balance.
Exactly. Chip away at your confidence.
Yeah.
And another common tactic is to try and isolate you from your support system.
Isolate me?
Yeah. She might start, talking bad about your friends and family.
Really?
Plant these seeds of doubt, trying to get you to pull away from the people who care about you.
Man, that's pretty manipulative. It's like she's trying to control you emotionally.
That's exactly what it is. And unfortunately, it can be really effective.
So how do you deal with that? I mean, if she's trying to control you.
Well, that's where this term comes in. You've probably heard of it. Gaslighting.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
It's a classic narcissist tactic. They're masters of twisting things around to make you question your own sanity.
Oh, let's see.
Like, let's say you try to confront her about a problem, right?
Okay.
And she just denies it.
Denies what?
Denies she ever said anything. Even if you know she did.
Yeah.
Or she'll just brush it off like, can't you take a joke?
Lighten up.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder if you're the one who's overreacting.
Wow. That's crazy making. So recognizing these signs, I mean, that's the first step, right?
Right.
But what can someone actually do to protect themselves?
That's a great question. And that's where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm all ears.
The most important thing, don't let her define you.
What do you mean?
I mean, her criticisms, her attempts to control you.
Yeah.
That's all about her insecurities, not your worth.
Okay.
Don't buy into those negative labels she's trying to put on you.
That's easier said than done, though, right?
Of course.
I mean, especially when it's coming from someone you love.
Absolutely. And that's exactly why it's so important to, have a strong support system outside the relationship.
Oh, I see.
Make sure you're talking to friends, family, people who really know you and see your value.
So they can remind you of who you are?
Exactly. And do things that make you feel good,
Things that bring you joy?
Yeah. You got to take care of yourself.
Self-care.
Right, because that helps to counter that sense of isolation that she might be trying to create.
So basically, arm yourself with self-love.
Yes, and surround yourself with people who remind you of who you really are.
That's powerful. But protecting yourself, that's just one piece of the puzzle, right? We got to talk about communication.
Absolutely.
Because let's be honest, that's a huge challenge in these types of relationships.
It really is.
So what can you do?
Well, the source we're looking at, it suggests 2 main approaches. First, be direct and assertive.
Direct and assertive. So lay down the law.
Kinda, yeah. But more like clearly express your concerns, set boundaries.
Okay, boundaries.
Yeah. Let her know what you won't tolerate and what'll happen if she crosses those lines.
I can see how that could backfire, though. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, Narcissists don't exactly have a reputation for handling criticism well.
That's very true, which is where the second approach comes in, understanding her perspective.
Oh, okay. So it's not just about being assertive, it's about, like, empathizing with her.
You got it.
Yeah.
We got to remember she's incredibly sensitive to criticism, and that comes from, well, a very fragile ego.
So how do you balance those two things?
It's tricky.
Yeah, it sounds tricky.
But I mean, you can be assertive without making it feel like a personal attack.
Oh, okay. So,
Right.
like, instead of saying, you're always doing X and it's so inconsiderate,
Exactly.
I could say something like, when you do X, it makes me feel Y.
There you go.
Yeah.
You're standing your ground, but you're also, you're navigating her emotional triggers.
It's a dance.
It is, definitely.
But what if things get really heated?
Yeah.
I mean, what if she starts yelling or even gets violent?
That's a really important point. If there's any kind of abuse, verbal or physical, then seeking professional help is non-negotiable.
Right.
A therapist can help both of you to, communicate in a healthier way.
Learn some anger management skills.
Exactly. And in some cases, it might even be necessary to think about separating from her
Wow.
for your own safety and well-being.
Yeah, that's a tough decision.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's the only answer. Okay, so we've talked about recognizing the signs,
Right.
protecting yourself, communicating effectively.
Mm-hmm.
But is there a way to actually use all this understanding of narcissism to make the relationship work?
Now we're getting into the strategy.
Ooh, game on.
The source actually suggests trying to understand her weaknesses.
Weaknesses.
Well, maybe vulnerabilities is a better word.
Vulnerabilities, okay.
For example, a lot of narcissists have this deep fear of losing control.
So if you can figure out what makes her feel insecure, what makes her feel threatened,
Yeah.
then you can use that to your advantage.
Not to manipulate her, but to understand what's driving her behavior.
Oh, I see.
And use that knowledge to navigate, those tricky situations.
That's fascinating.
For example, let's say you need to talk about something she's not going to like. Instead of, going head to head, you could try framing it as a problem you need to solve together.
Oh, interesting.
That way you're appealing to her need for control
Right.
while still getting your point across.
Smart. This is like learning a whole new language.
It is.
A language that lets you communicate without getting lost in translation.
That's a great way to put it. And that's the power of understanding, the psychology of narcissism.
It gives you the tools
Exactly.
to decode her behavior,
Yeah.
anticipate her reactions, and make conscious choices about how you respond.
Right.
But that raises the question, right?
What's that?
I mean, is it even possible to have a truly balanced and loving relationship with a narcissist?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's no easy answer. It depends, on a lot of factors.
Like what?
How severe the narcissism is.
Right.
If she's even willing to admit that it's a problem.
Okay.
And, most importantly, your own needs and limits.
What you're willing to put up with.
Exactly. This has been really insightful so far.
Yeah, I feel like I'm starting to understand these nuances of dealing with narcissism in a relationship.
Good.
But before we move on,
Yeah.
I want to go back to this idea of understanding her weaknesses.
Okay.
What exactly are we talking about here?
Good question.
Like, what kind of vulnerability should someone be looking for?
Right.
And how can understanding those be helpful?
That's a fantastic question. And it actually takes us to some really fascinating parts of the narcissistic personality.
Okay.
But to really understand those weaknesses and how they affect the relationship,
Yeah.
we need to give this topic the attention it deserves.
All right.
So let's continue this exploration
Okay.
in part 2 of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive. Into this whole world of trying to navigate a relationship with a narcissistic wife. Right. And before we went to break, we were talking about understanding, her vulnerabilities, or as we called them, her weaknesses.
Right. And I just want to reiterate, we're not talking about, exploiting her or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's more about trying to understand what drives her behavior.
Right. Like what's going on beneath the surface.
Exactly. So we can figure out how to deal with, those anxieties that are causing all these problems.
Okay, I like that. So can you give us some examples of these weaknesses? What should someone be looking for?
Well, one of the most common ones, and it's really deep-rooted, is this fear of losing control.
Fear of losing control.
Mm-hmm. You see, narcissists They often have this really fragile sense of self-worth.
Okay.
So they need constant validation from others.
To feel good about themselves.
Exactly. And they have to be, the one in charge. Always.
Always in control.
Yes, in every situation. And anything that threatens that perfect image they've built, well, it can trigger all sorts of anxiety and defensiveness.
Wow, that's intense. So it's like they're walking on eggshells all the time.
In a way, yeah. So if you can, identify what those triggers are.
The things that make her feel insecure, out of control.
Right. Then you can use that knowledge to handle those tough situations better.
So you're saying, if I know what sets her off, I can avoid pushing those buttons.
Not necessarily avoid them, but you can approach them in a way that's less likely to, trigger that defensiveness.
Oh, I see what you mean.
For example, let's say you need to have a serious conversation about something.
Okay.
And she's going to resist.
Yeah.
Instead of going in, guns blazing, challenging her directly.
Which would make her feel like she's losing control.
Exactly. You could try framing it as a problem you need to solve together.
Oh, like a team effort.
Yeah. That way, you're appealing to her need for control.
Smart.
But you're still, addressing the issue.
So it's like you're working with her personality, not against it.
Precisely. It's a delicate dance, It takes patience, empathy, right?
You got to be willing to see things from her point of view, even when it's hard.
Yeah, that can be tough. But if you can do it, it sounds like it could really de-escalate things.
Exactly. Create a more peaceful environment for both of you.
This is really interesting. But doesn't this approach kind of play into her narcissism?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
And in a way, yeah, I guess it does.
We're acknowledging it.
We are.
Not trying to change it.
Right. We're accepting that this is her personality.
Okay.
And we're finding ways to work with it. Remember, the goal isn't to fix her narcissism.
Right.
It's about giving you the tools you need.
Tools to
manage the relationship.
Yeah.
And protect yourself.
Okay, that makes sense. And this all goes back to what you were saying before about communication. It's not just about what you say, it's how you say it.
Exactly. And this brings us to another really important point from the source material.
Okay.
Using humor and positivity.
Humor.
Yeah. To disarm negativity. Now, I know that might sound kind of crazy. Yeah, a little bit.
But sometimes the best way to deal with her negativity is to not take it so seriously.
So instead of getting into an argument, I should just make a joke.
Well, it's not about, telling jokes all the time.
Right, okay.
It's more about trying to lighten the mood.
Okay.
Injecting some humor, some playfulness.
Oh, I get it. So if she's being critical, trying to get a rise out of me, I could just agree with her in a funny way.
Exactly. Let's say, she criticizes your clothes.
Oh, classic.
Trying to make you feel bad about yourself.
Yep.
Instead of getting all defensive, you could just say something like, you know what, you're right, my fashion sense is terrible. Maybe I should start a GoFundMe for a new wardrobe. Care to donate?
Huh. That's brilliant. You're totally turning it around on her.
And you're not letting her negativity bring you down.
I love it.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that kind of minimize the seriousness of her behavior?
It's a fair point. You got to be mindful of the context, of course. But remember, having a positive mindset, it doesn't mean ignoring the problem.
Okay.
Or letting her walk all over you. It just means you're choosing how you react.
Right. You're not letting her control your emotion.
Exactly. And this takes a certain level of detachment,
Detachment.
And that's where another important concept comes in. Understanding that her behavior, it's not really about you. It's a reflection of her own struggles.
Her own issues.
Exactly. It's not a personal attack.
But how can you not take it personally? It feels so personal.
It's tough. But we got to remember, underneath that facade of, grandiosity, narcissists are often deeply insecure.
Okay.
Their behavior, it's a way of compensating for those feelings.
It's like a defense mechanism.
Exactly. A defense mechanism gone wrong.
Wow, that's pretty insightful. So you can see it from that perspective. Maybe it's easier to not get so emotionally hooked.
That's the idea. It's not about excusing her behavior. It's about understanding where it's coming from and choosing to respond with compassion.
Even while setting boundaries.
Of course.
Okay, got it. So her negativity, it's more about her own pain.
Right.
Not necessarily a deliberate attempt to hurt me.
Exactly.
That's a really powerful way to reframe it.
It is.
Instead of feeling like I'm under attack, I can start to see her as someone who's struggling.
And that can change the whole dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not a battle to be won.
Right.
It's about understanding her and her struggles.
Man, this is really eye-opening stuff. I feel like I'm getting a whole new perspective on dealing with narcissism.
Good.
Before we wrap things up, though,
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier that the source suggests, identifying her weaknesses and using that understanding to deal with those tough situations.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us more about that? Like, what specific weaknesses are we talking about here?
Sure.
And how can understanding them actually be helpful?
Those are great questions. And they lead us to some really fascinating insights into, the narcissistic personality.
Oh, cool.
But to really get into the nitty-gritty of these weaknesses and how they play out in the relationship,
Okay.
we need to dedicate some time to it.
I'm all for that.
So why don't we continue this exploration in part 3 of our deep dive?
Sounds good to me. Welcome back to our deep dive. We've been exploring what it's like to be in a relationship with a narcissistic wife.
It's definitely been a journey.
And in this final part, we're going to dig into something we've kind of been hinting at all along. It's this idea of understanding her weaknesses.
Right. And again, we got to be careful with that word.
I know, it sounds kind of harsh.
It's not about taking advantage of her vulnerabilities or anything like that.
No, of course not.
It's more about recognizing what's driving her behavior.
Okay.
Those deep-seated anxieties, those insecurities.
Right, the stuff that's really going on underneath.
Exactly. Because once you understand that, you can start to see how it influences, everything.
How she acts, how she reacts.
They're like hidden levers,
Hidden levers that control the whole relationship.
That's a good way to put it. And you mentioned earlier, one of the most common weaknesses is this fear of losing control.
Yeah, you said that narcissists are terrified of not being in charge.
They are. It's almost like, imagine a house of cards.
Okay.
Meticulously built.
Delicate.
Very delicate. And this represents her image, her image of herself, her life. Everything has to be perfect.
And she has to be in control of it all.
Yes. Because any little thing that might make her look bad, any suggestion that she's not perfect, not in control, not admired, it's like a threat to her whole being.
Wow, that's a lot of pressure. So it's like her self-worth is totally dependent on this image she's created.
It really is.
Yeah.
She needs that constant validation.
Praise, admiration.
To prop herself up.
Okay, I get it. So how can understanding this fear of losing control, how can that help someone actually navigate the relationship better?
Well, it's about anticipating her reactions.
Oh, gosh.
Like if you know what's going to set her off, you can try to avoid those triggers.
Right, like walk on eggshells.
Not exactly. It's more about approaching things in a way that won't make her feel threatened.
That's confrontational.
Exactly. For instance, let's say you need to discuss, finances.
Ooh, yeah, that's always a sensitive topic.
It is. And, she likes to be in charge of the money.
Mm-hmm.
If you come in and say, hey, I think we need to change how we're doing things, well, that could make her feel like she's losing control.
Right. So what do you do instead?
You could try framing it as a team effort.
Oh.
Like, hey, I know you've been doing a great job with the finances.
Set her up a little bit.
Exactly. And I was thinking maybe we could, sit down together and look things over. I have a few ideas I'd like to share. I think we could make some really smart decisions as a team.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
You're acknowledging her expertise, but you're also creating space for your own input.
Exactly. And it's the same principle with other areas of the relationship, too. Like, let's say you want to go out with your friends.
Okay.
And she gets, jealous when you're not with her. Instead of just canceling your plans, you could say something like, hey, I'm going to go out with the guys this weekend, but I know how much you enjoy spending time together.
Right.
How about we plan a special dinner on Sunday? Just the two of us.
You're basically reassuring her.
Exactly. That she's still a priority.
But you're not letting her control your life.
Right. It's about finding those win-win solutions,
Where you can both be happy.
Exactly. It's not always easy, but it can get easier with practice.
This has been so eye-opening, seriously.
Glad to hear it.
I feel like I have a completely new understanding of narcissism and how it affects relationships.
That's great.
Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap up?
Yeah, I'd just say this. Dealing with a narcissistic wife, it can be incredibly tough. But it's not hopeless.
There is hope.
There is. Knowledge is power, right? The more you understand, the more you can make conscious choices about how you respond.
Instead of just reacting.
Exactly. And never forget setting those healthy boundaries, being assertive, but also compassionate.
Right.
And taking care of yourself. Those are the keys to navigating this whole tricky situation.
That's such an important message. And for all our listeners out there, remember, the journey of understanding, it never really ends. So keep learning, keep exploring, and never underestimate the power of empathy and self-care. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.